Recording on. There you go. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Mike, for being with us. This is Blaze-Camp Performance. And what I do is I train general population, and I have Olympic athletes that I work with True Fit Athletics in Miami. So these are hurdlers, sprinters, some boxers, and different athletes for their team. And little by little, I've been expanding my knowledge on all the things that we need, training wise, and just having a person like you come on the show is just amazing, because I can ask questions that I usually don't get the answers to online, but I know that you talk about them, and I know that you have all kinds of knowledge and info, and it's just, it seems like it's infinite, and you put together these models that are so easy to understand. But I don't want to get too much into who Mike is as far as like all your background and everything, because there's so much out there already. But kind of what's your specialty and what do you do the most?
Oh, yeah. So I have a PhD in sport physiology and performance from East Tennessee State University. And that means I was trained to take good athletes and make them better. But since then, my expertise has shifted or expanded a little bit more into how to make people stronger, more muscular, and leaner. I myself am a competitive bodybuilder, and I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu also. And just trying to work on getting people leaner and more muscular, and sometimes healthier as well. So that's all in the mix of what I do.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Doc. I appreciate you being here again. And I'm just going to get started with some of the basic questions, and we'll go from there. The way that I structured the questions was from the beginning, let's say a warm-up, all the way to a workout, and then all the way to, like, let's say supplements for helping and through that. So the first question I'll get into is a question that I get all the time, and I usually have to battle against athletes, not too much as far as it getting injured, but more of like, this is what they're used to. What's your thoughts on stretching and foam rolling before an exercise that requires, let's say, power and plyometrics? We can talk about sprinting, for example, and
Sure.
Power cleaning. What do you think?
Yeah, so static stretching especially has been shown to reduce power output subsequently. So you'd have to watch out for that for sure, and maybe not do it much or at all. Now, there is the option of dynamic stretching, which I'm not such a huge fan of that term. It's a fine term, but I think it's just warming up, going through the motions and stuff like that. So some dynamic stretches that are pertinent to the actual movement are fine, and they actually enhance performance. They don't reduce it. But sitting down and static stretching for a long time is probably unwise. Now, foam rolling, it seems to me, only has really probably one thing that it does, and that is it allows you to alter the pain modulation on the site that you are foam rolling. So a lot of times athletes can feel a little bit of pain and tightness in an area, especially if they start warming up. And that's because of the nervous system. And the nervous system there is essentially active in detecting some damage which may be there but may not be there. And then foam rolling doesn't actually change the tissue, but foam rolling can offer a differential stimulus. And then once that differential stimulus is integrated with the stimulus coming in from the parts of the nervous system saying, hey, there's pain and tightness here, what you might get is a kind of, once those two systems are integrate further up the chain, especially in the spinal cord and the brain, a lot of what you get is kind of an inhibitory effect on pain and tightness, because the foam rolling kind of sort of switched the beat. It's kind of like if you, this is a really crappy analogy, but if you have, very, very low audible, let's say sound of a baby crying, it could be really annoying. And you're like, ugh, like what the heck, somebody turn that off. So, that would be the pain perception and the tenderness perception or the tightness perception. And then foam rolling is basically you getting like a professional DJ in there to crank some really good music, some Miami house and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden you don't really hear you don't hear the baby crying at all. And then you can proceed confidently through the motions without that tightness and soreness and potential like pain, signaling being there. And so foam rolling has a big advantage on that. But, it doesn't take much foam rolling, and it doesn't alter the tissue at a deep level. So people who spend like 30 minutes foam rolling an area, and that's just like, it's like baseball players who don't wash their favorite gloves or something. And that's just pure, just mysticism at that point. So I think foam rolling is fine if it allows you to move pain-free with greater flexibility. If I was a coach at a deeper level, what would I ideally like to do with athletes that rely on foam rolling is kind of get them to rely a little bit less on it and eventually not at all. Because sometimes just through doing proper warm-ups and getting strong over time, taking good active rest phases and healing up, a lot of times that pain and tenderness in an area can just go away altogether. You don't have to do any foam rolling. So then the traditional warm-up is something you start doing again, which is, a little bit of warming up, a little bit of dynamic stretching that's pertinent to the activity. So for example, if you're training hurdlers, some like high knees are a real good idea to get everything flowing and going. It's not really a stretch, but it is a stretch. And then once they're warmed up, you start getting into the actual activity of hurdling and slowly ramp up the intensity. Then voila, you have a workout. So I think that foam rolling can allow folks experiencing some issues to actually get through those issues via neural modulation of pain and those types of things. But I don't think it's some kind of magic cure for stuff. I will say, probably one of the, dare I say, stupid uses of the foam roll is for people who actually nothing wrong with them. And they'll just roll their lower back before sprinting because everyone does it. Like, it gets my lower back going, right? Like, I don't know what you mean by that. It doesn't get anything going at all. It's just it's a fucking roller over your back. What can it possibly be doing in there?
Well,
So,
I mean, most of the people that I get that I see, let's say in general population, like in a CrossFit class, they'll be like, "Oh, I'm very sore in my quads, so I'm going to foam roll them," and I'm like, that means you're damaged. And you're putting a lot of pressure into it. You're probably just damaging it even more. Or like you said, like shutting it down. I imagine what you're saying with the baby, because it's like, when you were a kid, it's like you're crying and then somebody's like, "You want me to give you something to cry about?" Like, this is even worse. Like, right. I won't cry,
For sure. And a lot of times it's interesting because if you have detected that the issue, you've ruled out that the issue is structural, and there's nothing actually wrong with you, but you still have some pain and tenderness in an area. Sometimes it's neurogenic, in origin. There's nothing actually wrong with your tissue level. Then some foam rolling, if it helps, can be like a short-term, medium-term solution to that problem. But if there is actually something wrong with you, that's why the hell are you foam rolling it? Like it's like people who take a lot of pain medicine before they perform at an event. It's like, you could snap your shit up and have no idea.
Right.
I would really want to be in tune.
Yeah. Right. You won't feel it coming on basically. And it'll get worse. Or it can, but so let's say that some people listening to this might want to argue I when I stretch, I have, and I foam roll, I have more range of motion. What's happening at the fascicle level? Like, is there a lengthening of the actual muscle fibers, or is it just the fact that now, since you don't feel it, you can stretch more without feeling it? Like, what's happening in the actual muscle size?
So the muscle size can change with static stretching, but that requires brutal gymnastic style static stretching 6 days a week for 3 months straight. And then you make meaningful changes to muscle and tendon. In one session of stretching, you make maybe a 3% change in the muscle length, and a 97% of the rest of that is neurogenic in nature. It's your nervous system relaxing for you. Easy way to prove that one is to I don't know if weed is legal in Florida. Sure as hell is over here in Michigan. But you take a couple giant hits of a spliff, and all of a sudden you're way more flexible than before. I don't think the weed goes to your muscles and expands them. That's not how it works. Right. I'm pretty sure it just goes to the brain, and the brain's like, we're gonna all this excitatory signaling. We're gonna be okay with it. Just turn it all off, and then you feel really relaxed and sploosh, and everything's good. So if you need that range of motion during your warm-ups, an option is static stretching. Okay. But it has downsides. It's like saying, okay, there's enemy forces in this city that belongs to us. Like, enemy forces invade Miami, right? We can nuke Miami. It is definitely an option. I've been for that option for years. I hate Miami. It's too hot. Nobody would notice. If you nuke Miami, people would be like, "Hey, I've got a better suntan now." But maybe that's not the best option. It would work to enhance your range of motion to statically stretch. But maybe if you try some dynamic stretching or some intelligent drills and warm-ups, then you could find that you don't have to nuke Miami. You can go in there with just, a couple of guided bombs, no collateral damage, and you win, right? And so a lot of people will stretch statically in lieu of having, dare I say, a good coaching, good sport coaching. Because if someone's like, "Oh, my hip flexors are real tight," a good coach can be like, check out this dynamic warm-up. We're going to wait some 5 minutes to really rope you into this. And all of a sudden you're like, "Oh my God, I'm moving so great. I never knew about these warm-ups." Like, You need a better coach. If static stretching is your only warm up, be prepared to reduce your performance. And then here's the problem with that. You reduce your performance, you hit fewer PRs in training, which is not great for the psychology. But also let's say, okay, it's just training, no big deal. Well, are you really prepared to statically stretch before the Olympics? If someone's like, look, if you don't stretch, you get one, tenth of a second faster in the 100-meter. And you're like, shit, okay, then I won't stretch. Well, hold on a second. You've been training this entire time with stretching. Your muscles feel different. They move different. If you don't stretch before the Olympics, your chances of feeling awful and awkward and then actually running slower or getting hurt are way magnified. Wow. So at the end of the day, there's some wisdom to the idea that you kind of have to practice like you play. And if you're not willing to cut off, tenths of seconds off your time by static stretching it before you play, don't do it before you practice. Find another better way. And there are many, many better ways.
Yeah, that's kind of been fighting when they tell you, you every now and then you got to go live. Like you got to, let it out. You can't just practice to move and not be in a situation where you have to have the opportunity to utilize that or another move, Yeah. I get it. And in that essence, are we looking for, so let's say we're going to do it the way that's more scientifically beneficial to me to do a power movement or any of that. Are we looking to move through spaces also because we want to gain some type of temperature? That's essentially the warming up phase. Are we looking for synovial fluid basically in a lot of movements? How much would it be too much warming up? What do you think?
Yeah, great question. So the process of warming up, essentially, I would say there's three things we really want in warming up. One of them is physical warming up, and I'll get to how to do that properly in a second. The other is warming up, essentially awakening the nervous system's ability to go hard. As like if you think, well, what do you mean? My nervous system's also awake, always awake to the same extent. Bullshit. Wake up as soon as you can in the morning, grab a hand gripper right on your dresser and try to close it as hard as you can. You're going to feel like you have a baby's hand. You're like, that doesn't work. What the hell? And it's because your nervous system's like, what the hell? We're at work. Let me put out a cigarette. I was asleep. Like, it doesn't work like that. Your nervous system can ramp up. And an easy way sort of to illustrate that is, I don't do this at home, but if you skip a warm up in your squats, like let's say you usually go 45, 135, 225, and then 315 as your working weight. If you go 135 and then go straight to 315, that first rep or two, you're going to be like, oh my God, it's the heaviest thing I ever felt in my life. Your nervous system's like, oh, what are you doing? Like, we got to wake up a little bit. Now, once your nervous system is very awake, let's say 315 is your working weight, but you go to 365 for a quick double, that's going to suck. You come back to 315 and your nervous system's like, this is easy as hell. And you just go up and down super fast. So there is that component. And then lastly, there's a technical component, which remember, a very good warm-up eventually transitions. A warm-up can start general, like jogging is an okay way to start, or incline walking on a treadmill. But if you're a wrestler, eventually your warm-ups have to look a bit like wrestling, and your warm-ups as a sprinter have to look like sprinting. And then the technical qualities, you're warmed up, because you don't want to start training completely unfamiliar with that technique and feeling rusty. The warm-ups to get you feeling like you're in the groove, you know how to move, and then you're like, oh, this is great. It's smoothly transitioned to training. So it's physical warm-up, nervous system wakes up, and then also your technical abilities which technically is in the nervous system, but it's more in the brain and less in the peripheral structures and stuff like that. So the warming up component for physical warming up, absolutely, there's your muscles technically have a certain viscosity if you think about it, and their viscosity actually declines when you warm up, so they become less likely to tear and more likely to generate force. There's all sorts of different kinds of compartments around your joints with different kinds of fluids, blood, intracellular fluid, extracellular fluid, and that all warms up. It flows better. It allows you to essentially increase your performance in every conceivable measure. You can translate more force through a joint, through a longer range of motion. It bounces back reflexively better. It's not as likely to tear. Everything good comes from increasing temperature to what we can call a working active range, down from the temperature the joint usually sits at. The thing is, though, you made a very good point. What point is warming up too much? Well, you warm up until you feel temperature-wise like you normally would feel during a high-performance session, or at least at the beginning of one. When I go up to do a real heavy squat, for example, or I'm trying to sprint as fast as possible, I'm not covered in sweat. It's not like I just walked down the street in Miami for 2 miles in August or something. Like,
or just got out of the shower with the humidity here. You
True.
don't have to walk.
Anything in Miami, just short of like sleeping next to an air conditioner. But in any case, it's like if I'm sweating like crazy, you have to ask the question of like, is this how you get your best performance? They're like, no. So how do you get your best performance? Well, just being nice and warm and maybe having like a little spot of sweat here, and then I feel really good. Well, then you should only warm up until you're that warm. And then ideally, that whole warm up until you're that warm includes maybe a general warm up, maybe not,
Right.
but also includes the neurogenic warm up and the technical warm up all in it. So that by the time you are as warm as you need to be, you are actually ready to begin activity versus being like, all right, I got warm. Now what? And then, well, now we do the technical warm up and the nervous system warm up. And then you start to cool down again sometimes because the warm up is so easy. So
Right.
One of my not so things I'm not a fan of, again, in context, it can be quite good and it can work really well. But I'm not a huge fan of people like saying, all right, we're going to warm up and then we're going to start doing basketball drills, doing the basketball warm up. I want you guys to warm up by like getting on the bike or getting on the treadmill or getting on the elliptical. And they're like for 10 minutes or whatever, break a sweat. Like, the fuck does that have to do with basketball? Can't we just warm up doing basketball-like activities that start easy and become more
Right.
difficult? Like, oh yeah, okay. And then that way your whole warm-up doesn't take, 15 minutes of treadmill plus 15 minutes of warming up. 30 minutes, fuck that. Any sport requires me to warm up for 30 minutes, I'm out. This is no thanks. If we could just get 15 minutes total, we're all an intelligently designed warm-up has all of those factors going in concert. So when you're done with the warm-up, you are physically warm, your nervous system is wide awake, ready to produce high forces and very quick reaction times. And also your technique is starting to feel really good. And then you're really ready to have a super productive training session.
That's perfect. That's essentially when I see like high level athletes, when they warm up, the champions are usually not warming up that much. And you're like,
no,
are they ready?
And then people are surprised.
It's like they just PR'd. They're like, okay, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a different warm up when you like, let's say, train versus when you fight? Or like when you go train jiu-jitsu? Do you usually want to feel the same way? Or for you, it's just like, all right, let's start rolling easy and then we'll go from there? Or do you need to get yourself actually warm up before you go into your class?
Do you mean weight training versus jiu-jitsu? Or
yeah.
Okay, you don't mean jiu-jitsu class versus jiu-jitsu competition?
No, class.
Okay.
Yeah, because the reason why I asked, I'll give you context, is
please.
I used to be the guy that would get to the gym and warm up for 45 minutes to an hour before the class starts, and then the class warm up. And so I do have a lot of that now, and I understand where it comes from. So I want to know, like, well, what do you think about arriving super early to class and all the warming up that needs to happen to then do a jiu-jitsu class versus bodybuilding or, let's say, in-gym training? How do you take it yourself?
Yeah. So it's funny enough, if you look at what world champions tend to do most often in jiu-jitsu, at Worlds, when they have to roll as hard as possible. One of my friends and colleagues at RP, Dr. Jen Case, she is like a multi-time a black belt Pan Am champion, Masters World champion, all this other crazy stuff. And she just stands by the side of the mat until she's ready, and then she slaps hands and goes. And that's it. And most of her competitors will do like an arm circle or two, and then just do that. They just go. And so the thing is, like, Jen's been injured a ton, but when she competes, she usually doesn't have any current injuries. So to her catecholamine response is high enough for competition that she is sweating already, just getting psyched. And so she's sweating and she's limber and she knows what to do, and then she just goes. I prefer a little bit more of a warm-up. I like do some hip circles, do some arm circles, do some elbow stuff. I do a forward roll, backward roll. I actually can't do a backward roll properly, so I forward roll, pretend to do a backward roll, maybe backward, do some shrimping.
Then to the side.
That's right. Maybe do some positions. If I have someone with me, we'll go through a couple of moves, maybe. But honestly, I have very, very short warm-up. And before jiu-jitsu class, here, I'll drop a bomb, fine. We won't nuke Miami just yet, but close. So I think jiu-jitsu warm-ups are one of the most poorly executed things on that balance and one of the most pointless things. Here's why. Standard jiu-jitsu class structure is warm-up, then technique, then positional sparring, then live rolling. You may or may not do positional sparring, so maybe just technique and then live rolling. All right, fine. So let me ask you a question. what the fuck are we warming up for? When technique we do for 30 minutes and mostly it's just sitting around listening to instructor or going super slow with your partner. I don't need to be warm for that shit. That is the warm up, for the love of God. So if you structure jiu-jitsu properly, people show up. My coach at the jiu-jitsu company in Philadelphia and his previous coach, Ricky and Phil Migliarese at Bounds in Philadelphia, you just show up and they just start technique. That's it.
Right.
As class begins, you start teaching technique. As you do the technique, you're supposed to ramp it up a little, the partner gives you a bit more resistance. And then 30 minutes of jujitsu technique, which is as much stretching as you'll ever need in your life. And everyone's moving and doing the reps and the technique. And then you're as warm. It's the best sport specific warm up there is. And then they say, okay, positional sparring or live rolling, and everyone's ready. They don't have to warm up at all. So I'd say if you're showing up 45 minutes before jujitsu starts to warm up, you're dealing with some unbelievable injuries or neurogenic pain. You got to deal with somewhere else. Or you just really like feeling that flow and doing your own thing. Another thing I really hate about jiu-jitsu warm-ups in class is when, I understand this from a business perspective, that we're not all there to train in a super sports sciencey way. That like I take care of my fitness characteristics outside of class. I train and do cardio and everything like that. But some people, jiu-jitsu is their only exercise. So a lot of times during the warm-ups, that's when they'll run around in circles, do jumping jacks and push-ups, and people are dying. And I hate that. If I ever go to a jiu-jitsu class to visit, I sandbag all that shit like you wouldn't believe. People might think like when I come to roll at visiting some city, maybe people think I can't do a regular push-up because I'll do push-ups off the knees. And they'll be like,
Oh, snap.
that guy looks jacked, but he's weak as hell. When they start rolling with me, they're like, I was wrong about everything.
Well, you're right. You're right about the business side, because I remember this guy that I met, he was I think he was in the Mortal Kombat movie. I forgot. He was Scorpion in the Mortal Kombat movie. He owns many martial art places, I think in California. And he told us in a business conference, he was, well, you got to have the 3 S's. People got to leave sweating, smiling, and sore. And that was like the thing.
Yes.
It's a business side of it.
Yes, people are into jiu-jitsu for the fitness side. So I think for white belts, it's totally fine to beat them up a little bit. But I think honestly, like a lot of classes, if I've ever gone to big schools, when you go to the purple belts and above class, a lot of times they just don't do a warm up, and everyone's like, right. Thank God, finally. But so it's one of those things where the jiu-jitsu warm up is already way too long and too pointless. And if you can shorten it, and if you can actually eliminate it completely by just starting technique work is the definition of slow, controlled positions that gently put you into a bigger range of motion. The technique is specific. As you guys are doing technique in one enclosed room, in your gi especially, the temperature of the room goes up. You start to get warm. After technique, you have a little bit of sweat on you. Oh my God, it's perfect time to start live roll.
You guys ever done blind jiu-jitsu?
I've seen it done. I've never had an opportunity to do it myself. No.
It's crazy. Anyways, so it's when we're in training, let's say, for example, you have a jiu-jitsu athlete, and we're going to look to opposite sides of the spectrum. Let's say you have a sprinter, right? I like to program in a way to where fast twitch athletes, or predominantly fast twitch athletes, have these types of rep schemes, these type of workouts. Slow twitch athletes have another type. They can have the same movement. They'll just be performing different sets and reps and different things.
Sure.
And then like hybrid athletes, I would give them a little bit of something and then a little bit of something else. And I wanted to ask about that, because let's say now you've warmed up, you're in class and you're doing jiu-jitsu. Do you want, as a jiu-jitsu athlete or as an athlete that has to do a lot more isometric hold and then go to a movement, isometric hold, go to a movement, you're building lactate. And as you're building that lactate, you need to somehow clear that lactate to keep moving around, right? To not fatigue faster than your opponent. How do you train that outside of jiu-jitsu?
Yeah. So
the lactate clearance part.
Yes. The first question you have to ask is that your limiting factor? It may or may not be. If it's not your limiting factor, then you just train it in jiu-jitsu. Another question you would ask is, can I recover from more training of this type than I already get in jiu-jitsu? And if you can't, then you're just jiu-jitsu. So for a huge fraction of people, just doing live rolling in jiu-jitsu will take care of all those systems, cranking them as hard as they can possibly recover from. So what I would say is, if you need more of that kind of work and you can tolerate more, which professional jiu-jitsu athletes probably can, I will say There's many ways to do this, and I'll give you a couple, but my favorite, it's going to sound strange, is the elliptical. The elliptical is a whole body movement of pushing and pulling, especially unilateral pushing and pulling. So it's not leaving your upper body or lower body hanging. Some people say, lactic buffering work can be done with squats. Yes, but that's also going to give you super huge pump and really jacked quads. You may not need any of that in jiu-jitsu, and it beats the shit out of you. So fuck that. So what you can do is the elliptical is also non-impact. And if you're a jiu-jitsu athlete, you need your joints to be left the hell alone as much as possible. You're already getting messed up joints in just training. So what you can do in the elliptical is intervals of essentially you have a ramping system where you start easy, you go a little harder, you go a little harder, you start to burn all over and you're like, get me the fuck out of here. And when you're just at your breaking point, you lower the intensity down to continuously moving and moving and moving, just easy. And then when you're done vomiting up blood or gasping for air, you do another ramp. And over time, you modulate how many ramps you do in 30 minutes. You can do 45 minutes of 35, 40, 45 minutes eventually. You can also make the peaks of the ramps higher. When you show me a guy who is a jiu-jitsu athlete who can go, at level 20 on the elliptical for a minute straight cranking, and then 10 seconds after, he's like, and then after, 10 seconds over, and he's going, I'm like, fuck that. I don't want to roll with that guy. Who the hell's going to stop him? Right. And it's a super low impact way of doing it. Another great tool, which some people may not have access to as much, is a swimming pool. You can do the same kind of thing in a swimming pool. Make sure there's people around to save your dumb ass from drowning. But the swimming, again, is whole body. It is not impact. And you can ramp unbelievable total body lactate levels, which really is the thing. You can get a forearm that cramps on you in jiu-jitsu, and the best way to deal with that is just do resistance training to have jacked forearms, and also do lots of just jiu-jitsu and grip work and stuff.
Right.
But in combat sport, some people are familiar with like the total body cramp. When you have a high enough blood lactate, your brain just says, just stop. People are like, don't quit, keep moving. And you're like, I feel like I'm going to die. So the way to deal with that is potentially doing some swimming or some elliptical. And there's other ways to do it. If you don't have access to those things, you can do something like a clean and press or medicine ball toss circuit, CrossFit style. It's a little bit more impact, a little bit more specific muscle hits. You'll be sore in your arms or your quads or whatever. Not as good in my opinion, but can still do the job. And then all of a sudden, you're in unbelievable shape.
Is that so? The reason why I ask is because, let's say, for example, like you touched on, let's say a CrossFit athlete, I want to teach them how to clear lactate. And it's very popular now with aerobic capacity and Chris Inshaw, where it's like lactate clearance workouts. And these are essentially, if I have slow twitch muscle fibers that are conditioned to, from what I understand, because I don't know the physiology of it, if I have slow twitch muscle fibers that can eat up the lactate and use it for energy, then I can get back to oxygenated, high VO2 max, again, fast twitch muscle power movement. So if I'm, for example, in CrossFit and I'll do sets of, set of power cleans that are very fast, very powerful, they build lactate real quick, glycolytic, and then I can go for an 800-meter jog. I need to pace that jog in order to breathe and oxygenate and come back to doing that clean again at the right amount of speed and performance and strength and all that. Would it transfer if I did, let's say, if I did just an upper body lactate clearance workout versus a mainly lower body lactate clearance workout? Am I just being redundant? Is that just a heart thing and a system thing? Or can I train that muscle area to do that?
Oh, you can absolutely train the muscle area specifically. Because lots of things happen. Muscles take on more slow twitch type of action. They take on a more fast twitch type of action. You can increase capillary density in the muscle. You can intramuscularly alter the concentrations of various enzymes that do buffering and shuttling. Absolutely works at the level of a muscle and at the level of a system. So what I would say is try to match the activity muscularly as close as possible to jiu-jitsu, which really is whole body in most cases, maybe more upper body preferred, but and also make sure it has a huge systemic hit as well. And the elliptical stuff, the swimming stuff, some implementations of power clean, et cetera, that'll work. Jogging is okay. And if that's all you have, it's fine. But you can build some amazing lower body endurance and of course systemic endurance, but you can still have problems with local endurance. And if your forearm is cramped to shit, it doesn't fucking matter how great your legs feel. You can't grip the gi anymore. And someone passes your guard because you're like, I don't have a hand. And then you'll feel great as they're taking your back. So if you can have a situation where, you know, on the elliptical, you're grabbing the handles, I mean, every part of you starts to die. And that's great because then every part of you can get in really, really good shape. And the idea really with jujitsu is to match oftentimes your ability to clear lactate, et cetera. What I would just call cardio is a very general thing. And match your work capacity, essentially, more scientific term, with your style. Because some people have a slower style and a style that requires more pressure, more strength, and then they don't need to be infinite energy bunny rabbits that hop around everywhere because that's just not how they roll. And you say, well, why don't they also get that infinite energy? Wouldn't that be great? Well, yeah, but they might have to sacrifice some recovery and muscle mass. And if your game is based on like a slow passing game or a deep half game where you're using your muscular size against people, you don't want to turn into a fast cardio bunny because then people are going to be like, oh, this guy sucks. And then you're going to be like, well, in order for me to really use my physical tools, I have to change my game. No thanks. So set your tools to your game. But in every single game that you have, you want to make sure that for almost all cases, your ability to, your work capacity and short-term recovery ability is just above the level at which you'll ever need it to be a limiting factor for you. If you lose a match on cardio, you should be embarrassed of yourself. If you lose a match on technical qualities or speed or strength, shit happens. You know, they're got to beat you somehow. But work capacity is something most people can make so high that it's not realistic. You'll see world championship matches, and most of the guys at Worlds get great cardio just by training so damn much. You do jiu-jitsu 30 hours a week, you don't have a cardio problem anymore. You'll very rarely see people at Worlds gas out. That's not how people at Worlds lose. They lose and somebody takes their back, and they're like, as a matter of fact, you can see the guy's face as he's being loop choked. He's like, damn it. He's not even breathing hard. He's like, shit, I got caught. There's nothing to do now. So, you know, afterwards, you very rarely see afterwards when the guy's hand's being raised that his opponent's like too gassed out to raise his hand. No, they're fine. They're just like, God damn it, I suck. Because jiu-jitsu should be a technical exercise. If your cardio or your recovery ability, work capacity is limiting it, then you're probably just not addressing those things at a sufficient level of seriousness.
Yeah, we have that with a boxer. There's a boxer in True for Athletics. He's 6'9", like 250. He's a heavyweight, right? And this guy is just, you know, when me and him are talking, it's like boxing used to be a lot of, you know, low intensity, high endurance jogging for miles and miles, and you know, I was like, all right, I got it, you know. But then it turned into like, okay, now we know that this lactate clearance thing or this high power movement, you're fighting another heavyweight. They're gonna get on top of you. You're gonna have to hold their weight. If you put your hands down, because you can't oxygenate fast enough and recover faster than the other guy, as soon as you break off, they're probably going to knock you out. So yeah, it's not going to be that you gassed out and you can't breathe anymore. Is there's a punch coming to your face. So you need to keep your hands up. You need to stay clear of skill. So it's, can I be, Dr. Pat Davidson talks about Jacksonian dissolution. So the more intense it gets and the harder it gets, the more I de-evolve and I start losing my skills.
Oh yeah.
So yes, so it's like, to me, I've been telling him like, yeah, the cardio is fine, but when you go into high intensities, high lactate thresholds, that's when chaos starts to happen a lot more often. Than anything. So
and you have to be a little bit creative with boxers in order to replace that low intensity steady state endurance or moderate intensity steady state endurance. And one of the best ways to do it is, again, sorry, I'm beating my own drum here, but it's trying to incorporate technical and tactical work into the mix. Because first of all, it's more fun. What boxer doesn't want to be in the ring hitting other people? Like, you really want to be on the road running 10 miles? What the fuck is wrong with you? Nobody likes to do that except marathon runners. And they're insane people. They're way too happy. Their lives are way too perfect. I don't trust them. I think they're all in a cult. But so a boxer, you say, okay, hey, we're going to get 3 guys come in to spar with you. You're going to start with the hardest guy first. And then when you survive him, we'll put in the second hardest and the third hardest. And by the time you're in there for 6 minutes and each guy rotates in just for 2 minutes at a time, holy shit, you used to be a world's best boxer. Now you're desperately struggling to survive exactly the sport specific thing you want to be in. And yeah, you can beat any other boxer and you're the best, but can you beat 3 or 4 or 5 guys in a row? You're telling me that high level boxers have trouble getting 4 or 5 guys together for a sparring session, especially if they know not to full contact hit the guy, just tag and go. Like, that's ideal training, not only for the boxer, but for the sparring partners. If you were a junior level boxer, I was like, hey, Mike Tyson in 1985 needs a sparring partner. What are you going to say? No? You're like, thank fucking God, it's unbelievable. Can you imagine how easy my matches will be at Golden Gloves when I get to throw hands with Mike Tyson 3 days a week? It's awesome. It's a huge win for everyone. It keeps the training super sport specific. It still makes for great Rocky montages because it's boxing training, but it's just a little less of that stupid road work. And honestly, I think the road work is one of those, like, it was a straight line thought experiment someone did. When I'm running a lot, I'm in great shape. I can box better. True. And they also said, well, everyone has access to the road. True. But that doesn't mean it's the best thing ever. It's like people saying, like, the AK-47 is a great gun. It is. It's just not the best gun, not by a mile, not in many respects. But, does it work? Yes. Was it invented forever ago? Yes. So was road work for boxing. And people like to say, oh, I'm old school. Like to my friend and training partner Jared Feather's response is like, does that mean intentionally outdated? So you got to update your shit, and sometimes there's better ways of doing stuff. And let me just say this real quick while I'm on a rant. Old school guys really like to say what's hardcore. Well, like, yeah, sure, but sparring 8 guys in a row is way more hardcore than running on a fucking side street with idiot Philadelphians behind you yelling at you. I had to put in that Philly plug.
No, it makes all the sense in the world. And even if they want to break it down to like regress that, like, let's say you can't spar 4 people, it's hard to find 6'9" sparring partners,
Sure.
So it's like, all right, well, so Coach Joey, the owner of TrueFit, he'll make them, sprint 100 meters and then shadow box.
Yes.
Sprint 100 meters back.
Sure.
Okay, now we're going to do defense only.
Sure.
Okay, now you're done. Sprint 100 meters back. And it's like right there, you're essentially getting the skill work and making sure, okay, move your defense how you want to after you're fatigued. Fatigue yourself against, now go on offense. So it's
you can do all this on pads too. You can do it on the heavy bag. You can do it on pads. You can pound the heavy bag for 30 seconds, turn around, and your coach has a pad drill for you. You don't want to do that fucking pad drill. He's like, hands up, hands up, hands up. You're like, oh, that's hard training, and it's all boxing specific, as opposed to being like, oh, I ran 10 miles today. Like, what are you getting ready for a fucking running competition? What the hell's wrong with you?
Or, we're in Miami, so they're gonna essentially be training so much because of the weather out here that we're thinking also, like, how do we get them to recover fast enough with the right intensity? But because there's so often that you can train due to weather here, how do we, bring it back and keep everything together? And that leads me to the next thing, which is, let's say this athlete now, just like many Gen Pop, are trying to cut weight and lose weight. Can they get stronger as they're losing weight at those higher intensities as they're going up? Or is there a moment in time when they start weight loss that they can get stronger, and then they're going to have to not worry about strength and just go into intensities and fat loss more often? How would you see the performance-based, I want to perform better, and the fat loss or weight loss phase as it goes down?
Yeah, Alala, that's a great question. It really, I'm not just going to say it depends and then leave you hanging. I hate that answer. I'll give you all the contingencies as well. It depends on what the state of the athlete is coming into camp. Because there are 2 ends of a spectrum, and everyone in let's say the fight world, or any sort of real, let's say the fight world, anyone in the fight world is on one of those 2 ends of the spectrum, or anything in between. One end of the spectrum is a person who trains in a periodized, serious, rigorous manner, essentially all year long. That doesn't mean they're training all year long. They get maybe a month off here or there totally from training to let everything recover, but they're on a periodized plan in which they're training the majority of the time. And that means they'll be their physically strongest in the gym right before camp begins, probably. And then they will slowly, lose some overall strength as they get into camp, and the training volume for boxing specific training goes up super high. How the hell are you supposed to be your strongest when you're throwing 8,000 punches? Get the fuck out of here. That's not going to happen. But you try to do your best to conserve as much strength as you have. That's on the one end of the spectrum. And my answer to that person is, when you enter your fat loss phase and you really trying to lose the weight or whatever, then you just try to maintain as much strength as possible. I wouldn't expect you to get much stronger, if at all, because you hypothetically have been working on strength the other fucking 8 months of the year, whatever. Now, I have another really quick thing to say. A lot of times fight camp is not the time to cut weight. Ideally, when my colleagues at RP program for fighters, they try to get them pretty close to their weight class just before camp so that they can enter camp and think about fighting people, not eating cans of fucking tuna all the goddamn time and being super low energy. It's the worst. Like, I didn't invite you to fight camp so you could gas out and throw up after 3 minutes. Motherfucker, what did you eat today? Like, I had thought about lettuce and then I ate a can of tuna and I hurt myself. Like that, wow, way to fuel fight camp. You have to fuel fight camp. Ideally, you come in already fucking lean and close to your weight. And then fight camp introduces a shitload of fight-specific volume, feeds you tons of good food, and because the volume is so high, you lose a couple more percentage points anyway, and voila, you show up and you cut your water last 3 days and everything works out. Guys, so that's one end of the spectrum. That's the real perfect way to do it.
Right.
You work with real people, so I'll tell you the way you probably see a huge fraction of too many people that you work with. I used to do this stuff all the time. I'm in the fight community around jiu-jitsu. I know how it works. Here's how it works on the other end of the spectrum. You call up your fighter and you're like, hey, idiot, you got to fight in 3 months. And he's like, who the fuck are you? And you're like, how many drugs are you on right now? He's like, I don't know. You're like, great. Why don't you show up to the gym? It's completely out of shape, 20 pounds, 30 pounds heavy, doesn't really remember what boxing is. You got to detox his dumbass and get him out of detox and throw him into the ring a few rounds. And then you got to impose weight training, cardio or ancillary work capacity training, boxing training, and fat loss nutrition at the same time. They get a really radical transformation, slow clap. They pre-fight camp versus post-fight camp, they're a different person. And they say shit like, man, I love fight camp. I love it. Get serious here with my boys. And a lot of time that's cover for the fact that they were fucking missing in action for 3 or 4 months before that. Right. For those guys, they will absolutely get stronger the entire time that they're in fight camp up until the last 3 days when you have them do their water cut. Why? Because they were weak as fuck to begin with, because they were derelicting their duty to be the ultimate athlete who never skips a beat. And the ultimate, a lot of guys can get away because, let's be honest, some of the guys that do the best in MMA and BJJ and boxing, they're just genetic freaks. They can get away with this bullshit of training for 3 months before a fight and then going away and another 3 months before a fight. But that doesn't mean that they make the best kind of athlete. Like, if you found out that I don't know anything about Israel Adesanya's training, for example, but if you found out that Israel Adesanya was the kind of guy that like just trained for a month and a half really hard before his fights, you could be like, oh, I'm almost as talented as him, not quite, but I might be able to just train so much more rigorously and more Rocky Balboa style that I could beat him just on cardio or just on repetitions, right? If you found out Israel Adesanya breathes, sleeps, and eats training 24/7, 365, you're going to be like, who the fuck am I supposed to do about that? Like, this guy's every opportunity to get better he has taken. And I would say that, like, so to answer your question of, are guys supposed to expect getting stronger through a camp for boxing, for example? If you did things right, ironically, if you did things right, no. If you did things wrong, yes, but that's not a good thing because you're way fucking behind.
What about Gen Pop? Let's say the guy in the CrossFit class that's trying to get a bigger squat, and he's been there for a couple of years, and all right, I'm going to go into a fat loss phase and also into a strength phase for my squat. Yeah. Where's that guy?
I mean, it depends on how much more he has genetically to gain, and depends on how seriously he flips the switch. A lot of people will say they're in a fat loss phase, but because they're like timing their meals, maybe they're using the RP Diet Coach app or something like that, and for the first time in months, they're actually eating enough protein. And because they're fat loss phase, they're taking their sleep more seriously and they're sleeping more. And all of a sudden that guy can gain some decent strength and be like, oh my God, like, we used to have a lot of people, we actually still do in our RP clients group, but be like, it's a myth that you can't lose fat and gain strength at the same time. I did it. I'm in the back being like, that's really good, but that is a rather unusual case. So a lot of times, maybe a way to ask the question is, would I bet on it? Would I bet on someone getting stronger through the fat loss phase? And the answer is I would not. My best bet is you can probably be just about as strong as when you started, because you're in a hypocaloric environment. You're not getting tons of nutrition for recovery or for muscle anabolism. And that's just not ideal for putting on size and strength. And so if you get really, really upset about the fact that you haven't gotten stronger in 3 months of fat loss phase, I'll be like, oh yeah, I guess that kind of sucks. But what else happened? Did you lose any fat? And they're like, oh yeah, I lost 10 kilos of fat. And you're like, all right, isn't that a win in and of itself? It's like saying, like, some people pay attention to all the wrong stuff and really shoot themselves psychologically in the foot because they maybe they want to get better at everything at the same time, which is kind of crazy. But like, how many people after spending like an unbelievably productive day at work come home and they're like, man, I just don't feel so out of shape. I just barely do any activity with my body. They're like, how much money did you make today? They're like, I made $5,000 of sales. You're like, isn't that a good thing? Like, well,
Yeah.
I guess. Like, how many people hang out with their kids? Beautiful bonding session for 2 hours, and they're like, I felt like I hadn't made any money with my kids. What the hell is wrong with you? So when you're in a fat loss phase, try to keep everything steady and keep it from falling, and focus on losing the fat. And then you can get back to the muscle growth phase, maintenance phase for strength training, where stuff really happens. If you want everything to go well at the same time, you can do it. Just be a beginner and be really out of shape. If you're not a beginner and not out of shape, get ready to push some parts of your front line forward while maintaining other parts, and then like this, and then like this, and then like that.
Yeah, I heard you say, dividing and conquering is the best way to approach these things. But essentially what you're saying is the same thing as the elite level athlete. It's if you're doing things wrong and you somehow put them together to be right, yeah, you're going to gain strength and lose body fat. If you're doing things right, you'll get to the point where you're going to have to divide and conquer, gain your strength, eat the energy required to keep getting better and stronger, and then eventually hold on that strength, and then let's get the levels of nutrition down, or as far as like caloric intake down, so you can start losing the body fat, right? Like that's essentially
100%.
Right?
Well, those fighters that show up after not training for 3 months, a lot of they are untrained. Relatively speaking, they're way untrained. And mostly they're just getting back the old stuff they used to have. Like, guys would be like, oh yeah, I used to bench XYZ, but that was right before my last boxing match. And I haven't benched much since. You're like, okay, so what the fuck have you been doing? They're like, well, I've just enjoying time with my family. You're like, wow, watch out for this guy. He's so dangerous. He hangs out with his family. Crazy.
I tell people in the general public all the time, like, you squat better than 60% of my athletes, right? Like that's no, and they're like, no way, these are professional athletes. I'm like, yeah, I coach the same squat in both spectrums, So now let's go into, okay, we're getting stronger, and let's say I want to get stronger. Sometimes I tell athletes, okay, look, if we need to get stronger than this, strength comes correlated to hypertrophy. In what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong. So I tell them, let's go into a hypertrophy phase, because I don't see any gains coming in from the strength portion. And this hypertrophy phase is going to, let's put a little bit more reps into the squat, a little bit less weight, and let's get more volume in the mechanical loading versus the systemic loading, and get you to move further into hypertrophy. And then we go back into the lower reps and work on that strength again. What do you think of that as far as like getting somebody stronger on their way?
Yeah, I think it's great. The only thing you can consider is, what is the situation like with respect to their weight class and their level of leanness and muscularity? If someone is like at the top of their weight class and they're super jacked and super lean, going through a hypertrophy phase can be tough ask, because there's just not anything left to put on. If you put on some muscle, the guy won't make his water cut. And then you'll be like, oop, just kidding. I guess you're not a light heavyweight anymore. I'm sorry. To spend 3 months preparing you for the fight, and then you have to eat $50,000 because you didn't make weight. Those are relatively rare. And if your needs analysis says not only do we need more strength, but we can use more muscle on our frame to build that strength, then it's super easy and straightforward, because at the end of the day, how much muscle you have is the biggest correlate of how strong you are. There's actually been some recent publication in literature, my colleague Menno Henselmans has discussed it, is that a lot of the strength you get, as far as strength differences between like a wrestler or a power lifter or a gymnast, are strength differences that are mostly neural in nature when the athletes are roughly the same size. So a lot of power lifters, you see them, you're like, that guy's not that big, but he's really strong. It turns out that's a very technique-based strength. And yes, they have a general ability to recruit their muscle fibers that's really high. But if you do jiu-jitsu with a very strong powerlifter, you quickly find out, like, he doesn't feel that strong. The guy's an idiot. He puts his middle limbs in all the wrong places. So a lot of times, what really makes the difference in the end, what's transferable, what do you keep when you change your technique from powerlifting, jiu-jitsu, gymnastics? You keep the muscle. The muscle is the great equalizer. So if you show me a guy in the street who like wants to street fight, he's a super jacked dude, you're like, do you want to fight that guy? I'm like, fuck that. He's going to hit me really hard. And they're like, oh, no, don't worry. He's just a bodybuilder. Like, I don't know, man. I know cross-sectional area is a thing, and he's remotely athletic. I don't want any part of that. It's trippy too, because like I've been the jacked guy in jiu-jitsu in a bunch of training rooms. And even like a lot of black belts, like out of pride and honor, knowing they can fuck me up, they'll fight me. But a lot of them are like, let's start slow. Nobody wants the big guy because size is the ultimate killer. Like, fuck that. Like, imagine if
Right.
Brian Shaw put on a white belt and did
Oh.
jujitsu. Like, there's a lot of moves that straight up don't work on him. Like, close your guard. We're like, around what? I can't see in either direction. They're just 460 pounds laying on top of you. Like, you don't need any submissions, Brian. So
This is blind jiu-jitsu.
That's it. Just do this. So at the end of the day, putting on muscle is awesome because it is the one thing that fuels strength gains, but it also is the underlying big supplier of strength in a theoretical level. That's where your strength comes from.
Right.
If you got a guy that's a really great deadlifter because he has long arms and he's skinny and he has a really strong hamstrings and lower back, he has a shitty upper body and his legs aren't that strong. Am I afraid to do jujitsu against him? No, I'll fuck that guy up. I'm not going to let you deadlift me. Fine, deadlift me. I'll just armbar you while you do it, whatever.
Yeah.
But if a guy's all around jacked, I'm like, I don't know, man. I feel like he can get in here and fuck me up. And that's not me hypothesizing. That's me having rolled with tons of jack dudes. Like, you get a guy who's never done jiu-jitsu and he's really jacked, he's instantly a problem. You're like, God, Jesus, stop moving so fast. And you're so fucking strong. And I try to flip you, but you base out really well because you're fucking strong. It's awful. And if you can get an athlete more like that rather than less like that, like you're well in the mix. And there's always that guy that brings up, like, what about Nate Diaz? Yes, Nate Diaz is phenomenally under-muscled. But imagine this with his technique and honestly his heart and his like gutsiness. Imagine if he was jacked. Fuck that. I don't want to run into he'd be world champ 3 times over. It always helps to be more jacked if you can afford the weight class movement. Absolutely put on that muscle. And a lot of people say, like, oh, if I put on muscle, I'll be really slow. Like, aren't fat people slow? Where have you seen, if you think muscular people are slow, you got to explain some shit that happens in the National Football League. Because holy fucking shit. Like, those guys are jacked and they're fast as hell. How do they avoid all that? Like, well, muscle can move you around really fast.
Yeah, no, and when I tell people all the time, like, oh, I don't want to get big and lose range of motion. It's like, you don't lose range of motion. Just muscles get in the way.
Yes.
More than you lose range of motion. Like,
yes.
There's not a thing that is like, oh, my muscles don't move now because I'm jacked. It's like, that's not.
Well, I had a guy ask me right before we started rolling. He's like, so does all that muscle help you with jiu-jitsu? I'm like, we're going to see. Afterwards, he was like, you were right.
Yeah. No, and let's say now the same question, let's say for the general public, the weekend warrior at the CrossFit gym, would it benefit him to go through a hypertrophy phase when strength is kind of locked up, or just staying in strength would be the best thing for him? If
strength is locked up, then you seem like a super sharp guy. You probably mean you've taken a real decent stab at it multiple weeks. And if nothing's really moving and you've examined their life and their recovery and everything, and it's not like any huge red flags, yes, probably time to put on muscle. And that's not really ever the wrong answer unless they really feel like they're overly muscular already, which is unlikely.
No.
I'll put another little bit of fuel on the fire. A lot of people are in CrossFit nominally because they want to be in better shape, whatever that means. But at the end of the day, they just want to be able to do 2 things: look good naked and have sex with their wife or other people that are not their wife. It's Miami. Everyone's my wife. So
don't nuke us.
That's right. No, please don't nuke us yet.
We just want that. That's it.
That's right. That's it. So, if you say, hey, like, the downside of us moving away from strength is you'll get like ripped abs and veins, they're going to be like, oh, that's sweet. I've actually, like, a lot of people who start training for strength because they don't want to admit that they're vain at the end of the day. I've like managed to court away from strength training, not because I think there's anything wrong with strength training. I've introduced more people to powerlifting than I care to admit, but because a lot of people are in the gym, they come to the gym to say, I want to be in great shape. I want to be strong. I want to be healthy. I want my kids to see me. And what they really mean is, I want that Brad Pitt to have the sex muscle, the lower ab.
Yeah.
Like, I want that, damn it, for once in my life. Can
the
I please look
D'Angelo.
like, that's right. Exactly. Yes, my man. So, if I can get that, I'm going to be the shit. And then you give them my hypertrophy phase or 2, fat loss phase. They look amazing. And people are like, hey, what's your max squat? And they're like, I don't care. Like, right. I'm out here in Miami, you know what I'm saying? Max squatting these hoes. You feel me?
The reason why I usually think of that, like, all right, let me change this guy from strength after like 8-12 weeks of strength and it's just not going anywhere. I usually get them to switch over and get their mind to think, okay, I'm just going to do hypertrophy. And I usually get more volume out of them. And then it turns into stronger, which then we go back to strength, and I'm like, all right, test it out. Oh, this move's a lot easier. It's like, you probably just worked out harder instead of saying, oh, I can't do 6 reps. I'm gonna do 5 and racket. Lalo, I'm not strong. You know, it's like, let's go over here.
Lalo, that's a great point, because you can get some mental blocks with strength. And if you go to hypertrophy, you can sometimes get to such high weights for sets of 8 that when you come back to your old sets of 3, you're like, oh shit, this isn't that challenge. This isn't that intimidating anymore. And also you forgot what was hard. You're like, what was my best triple? And you look at Lalo and the coach is like, just do this. And they hit a set of 4 and you're like, congratulations, that was a PR. And they're like, whoa. So it's great. You know, there's a certain staleness that develops in trying to push maximum strength all the time. And part of it's psychological staleness. And if you want to get away from that, you go to hypertrophy. Not only does it build underlying mechanisms to make you stronger later, but it switches your mindset away from just trying to get linearly stronger all the time, which can be crushing.
I like it, man. Thank you. Now, what are your recommendations for, let's say, supplementation for people that want to do all these things together? So again, it's let's say the Gen Pop guy, the sprinter, the boxer, all these people just want to perform better. What supplements can go through the spectrum from beginner to, pro athlete that you think these are safe, that you can use? These are going to help you in certain performance to get better. What do you think? Legal supplements.
Legal supplements. There's not a very long list, unfortunately, or for whatever it's worth. Creatine is a great alternative. It does all kinds of really great things. Having a whey protein in lieu of being able to eat enough high quality food is a fine idea if you need it. Sometimes a casein protein shake at night if you can't stomach any more food, and it's very good for your macros. It's super high protein, super slow digesting and stuff like that. You can choose, if you're doing multiple daily sessions, you need to rehydrate, you can choose like a carbohydrate powder and potentially some electrolyte mixes or electrolyte powders that also fuel your performance and your recovery between the really heavy bouts, especially pertinent in Miami. One of the things I see is some CrossFit gyms, guys are having 3-4 hour workouts and they're just drinking water. And I'm like, you're going to run out of electrolytes and in 2 hours, and you're going to be like, oh, my performance is down and I'm cramping, but I'm drinking water. Like, don't do that shit. Drink some whey protein, some Gatorade, and some electrolytes mixed together. It tastes great. It keeps you super hydrated. And all of a sudden everything's going well. In addition to that, I'd say like a multivitamin, multi-mineral, just to check your boxes, dot your I's, cross your T's, and you should be eating whole foods in general. There's some other supplements that I'm interested in discussing from a theoretical perspective. Beta alanine, especially, quite good for CrossFitters and boxers and things, because it's been pretty well demonstrated to enhance your repeat endurance and you sort of like 400, 800 meter type of endurance, buffering lactate and stuff. Is it good for hypertrophy? Probably not, probably no effect. But is it good for your overall performance? Yeah, it can be. It also makes you feel really weird and tingly after you take it. Some people seem to like that. I hate it, but gotta do some crazy shit for this game.
It's Miami.
No, that's right. That's Miami. Hell yeah, we take weirder shit. Another one is like judiciously used stimulants like caffeine can, at the right times, especially in a crazy fat loss phase, hard workouts you're having trouble getting up for. You can use some stimulants judiciously. I'd say there's maybe a few other supplements, but those are kind of the main ones.
Yeah. So creatine, I usually get the people that go, well, it makes me retain water. What's that?
Yeah. So creatine goes into your muscle cells and it pulls extra water into your muscle cells. So it makes you retain water, but your water retention is in your muscles. So you actually look half pumped all the time, which is sweet. You also recover faster and you're stronger. So I don't ever see that as a real terrible thing. I think most of the people who say creatine bloats me are people who look only at scale weight and they have a not so great relationship with the scale. And they looked at, they used to weigh 135 pounds. Now after creatine for 5 days, they weigh 140 and they're like, I can't do this. And it's like, wait, you're a superstar 140. So you actually look leaner because you're more jacked and say at the same amount of body fat, but your muscles are 3% bigger. And so, okay, you weigh a little bit more, no big deal. There are some athletes who can consider, very elite weight class sports. Like if you're a gymnast, it might throw off some of the way you feel the bars out if you're a little heavier, a little lighter. But for those folks, I would just say, get ready for a little bit of a disturbance in your performance when you start creatine. But after you continue to use creatine, your weight restabilizes, your performance really stabilizes, and you just keep taking creatine for months on end in the hardest part of your training block. And it's just better for you to take it than it is not to take it.
That's perfect. And, I don't think that I can get any more answers. Like, this is perfect. It's been what, an hour already, and you've gone through everything that I kind of, you know, not doubt myself, but I kind of just think about these things. And you know, there's many videos online, and there's a lot of enter training that I call online of people just doing
That's
stuff.
a good term.
You know, yeah, they're enter trainers. I call them all the time because, you know, people ask me, like, I'm a pro athlete, I want to try this ab workout. It's like, that's not abs. This is not for you, you know, that kind of thing. So I have to fight against these things. And you've answered every question that I have so far. And I just can't thank you enough for being here. Do you have anything that you want to tell people that are listening to this? Any new project that you want to talk about? Any website that you want them to visit? Anything, anywhere you want to direct anybody listening as far as like for what you do?
Yeah, folks, if you like the stuff I'm saying, just come visit us on the Renaissance Periodization YouTube. Type in Mike Israetel or Dr. Mike Hypertrophy, Dr. Mike Strength, anything. Google, send you right to our YouTube. Give us a like, a subscription, and watch our videos. We put out like 4 or 5 videos every week, and most of them are just on intellectual topics exactly like this, peeling apart myths, giving you information on how to train and coach and structure everything. There's no bullshit science based approach that we just, you know, there's enough people lying to people out there that we just don't do that. So if you want some more of that, please come through. And Lyle, I got to tell you, I get on a lot of podcasts, and a lot of times people ask me questions. I'm like, wow, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. You come off as an absolutely consummate professional in the field, and it's just really impressive. I would love, if I was a professional athlete, you would be an unbelievable coach, and a lot of people don't get that lucky. So, you know, a lot of people out there being coached by people who are like, hey, this ab workout on Instagram looks good. Let's try it. I literally know people that are doing Instagram workouts.
Oh my God.
Pro athletes.
Thank you, Mike. That's an honor. Thank you very much for all your time and all your help. And again, you know, guys, Renaissance Periodization, that's it. Like, go there, find them. They won't nuke Miami. We're going to be fine. We're going to be all right, guys. All right. Thank you, Doc. I appreciate you, man.
Peace,
Take care.
Take care.
Later.